Hi everyone, my name is Philipp Meissner. Welcome to What's Next. If you care about where growth, influence and innovation are headed, look to Africa. Adebola Williams has helped shape presidential campaigns, launched global media platforms and inspired a generation. Today he shares the real story behind Africa's transformation and why the world should pay attention. Adebola, welcome to What's Next.
Thank you for having me.
So, many people say it's the African decade now. What's your take on this?
They're not wrong, it's the youngest continent in the world and will continue to be. The world is currently grappling with an aging population, and Africa is poised to be the youngest, in a couple more years. At the moment, we're still, one of the youngest, and in a couple of years, we'll be the youngest. The median age is about 16 point something, I think. And so, it's really young. And youthfulness comes with energy, comes with the sharp minds, comes with innovation. And that's why you find the Africans around the world and they're thriving. Oftentimes people leave Nigeria to go to school abroad and they get into class and like, wow, it's so easy. Because in here we're trained with a higher form of discipline, stringent rules, stringent timelines, so much is put into you that when you go abroad and you're given choices and allowed to build your own schedule, to build your own timetable, it's like, wow, is this how you guys operate here? Because we're used to a lot of, discipline and just, stretching ourselves to the farthest. And so because we have that background in being able to stretch ourselves, Africa thrives on resilience. We are resilient people. We are tenacious people. We are very agile, very fluid, very quick on our feet. To throw us into somewhere, we go in there, we figure it out, and then we find the opportunity and we go for it. And so because of that capacity, that the number of us and the thing inside us that says that we can make magic happen in any situation, it's really the ticket of Africa. Also in terms of technology, Africa is, catching up fast and strong. At the moment in Nigeria, we're currently training 3 million young people to have a good hold of tech and the foundations of AI and Africa intelligence. And so, with 3 million people being empowered, imagine what's going on in Lagos, in Abuja, in Nairobi, in Kenya. And so in terms of technology, Africa is not sitting down. We're also, pushing ahead. In terms of natural resources, we continue to be, the heartbeat of resources. I mean, this iPad I'm using right now, iPhones, is done with cobalt. Cobalt has gone from, Africa. Gold, Dubai is very famous for gold, but gold is from Africa. Gold, from Ghana and so on and so forth. Switzerland is known for chocolates. Ghana produces 60% of chocolate, that's used in the world. So Africa continues to also take the lead when it comes to natural resources. So human capital, we're there. Technology, we're catching on fast. Natural resource, we are leading, in that space. And then when it comes to culture and identity, the whole world is beginning to grapple for real, authentic culture. And so African films, African music, African food, African fashion is now being center stage. The world is coming to look for identity, culture, affinity, a sense of belonging in Africa like never before. Billions of dollars coming back into the continent, aside from the usual, money is being repatriated back into the continent and all the, transfers that's been sent back. People are now intentionally coming back into the continent, coming into the different countries from Nigeria to Kenya, Ghana to Senegal, to holiday, to invest, to build, to buy businesses, to build businesses, because you can see, and then the resilience of Africa, even in terms of withstanding natural disasters. So you hear about earthquakes in Japan, Hong Kong. Today you hear about Hurricane Katrina in the US. You hear about fires in LA. You hear about all sorts of disasters going on around the world. And somehow, even COVID, Africa seems to just have this resilience, that is withstanding all of these things. And yes, we have challenges, but in the midst of all the challenges, we continue to thrive. So indeed, anyone who's paying attention, and looking beyond what the superpower wants you to think. Because when the superpowers sit down to decide and shape economies and make projections, they always treat Africa like an amateur child, like that premature child. They refuse to center Africa. And that's because they need to continue to pillage Africa. And if they center Africa as Africa should be centered and present Africa in its full superpower two things will happen. One, Africans themselves, suddenly realize that something has been shifted off them and will stand up even taller. Already, we intimidate the world. Already, Africans stand too tall. Africans stand too tall in the world. We intimidate the world, and that's why they continue to find ways to suppress Africans, suppress the black color anywhere in the world. And then when Africans rise up, what it also happens is it then reduces, the opportunities. Because right now, they can shortchange Africa. They can come to the continent and take our resources and say, oh, we'll bring it back to you in finished goods, and we'll sell it to you 50 times more than what we got it from you. That changes. And so the controllers, there are always institutions and establishments that control the world and controls businesses and sectors. Unless as Africans, we fight for our place at the table, which we're already doing, which a new generation of young people like myself and many more are already doing, with the young presidents you see on the continent are already doing, until Africans for Africa comes together to fight for ourselves, shape our future, by ourselves, looking inwards, taking our own resources, maximizing our own people, ensuring that the resources that's for development in our countries go to development, such that the countries are working and we no longer have to begin to send out our products in raw form to be produced by people who have no inkling the blood, sweat, and water to grow and preserve those things. And then they come back and lord it over you and control even your resources and how you get them back. Until we as Africans change that, we are already on that journey. For now, the truly perceptive people know that Africa is where it's at.
Wonderful. I mean, you highlighted many issues, and I'm glad to unpack many of them throughout our conversation. When we take the perspective of global investors, global businesses, you talked about them a little bit in your previous answer. What do you think are the biggest blind spots that international businesses have when it comes to Africa?
One would be thinking Africa is monolith. Sometimes I don't even have a problem with that, thinking Africa is a country. But the challenge with that from their perspective is they fail to realize that there are unique opportunities across the 54 countries on the continent. So many investors overlook our diversity and they apply one size fits all onto the continent. The other challenge is that they also fail to realize that, yes, indeed, Africa still has growing pains, but they fail to recognize the significant progress and the economic reforms that are in works that is also speedily accelerating Africa to where it should be. So they need to do a lot more in recognizing, that Africa is growing, Africa is changing, and so they need to pay attention to that. The other blind spot is thinking that they can just push over Africans. They can just walk in and push over, because you have a savior complex, it's a blind spot. You can get more if you collaborate with Africans to enlarge the pie and let everyone get a share of that pie. And then the final thing I would say is that sometimes they miss the local context. They're not paying attention to local context. They're not trying to understand deeply, the people. I was watching a documentary recently on Bata, the shoe Bata from India. And in growing up as a Nigerian, I thought Bata was a Nigerian brand. And guess what? In many other countries that Bata sold, many people in those countries thought Bata was a local brand. Because they come in, they understand the people, understand the language, understand the cultures, and then they fit themselves in. In actual fact, they build their factories in local communities, empower and employ the people in that community such that everyone feels that they're a part of something that belongs to us. And unfortunately for them, there is a version of Bata in almost, all the countries. In Nigeria, for example, the language I speak, which is Yoruba, Bata, and Bata. Bata means shoe in my language as Bata, And so they found a way to understand the local context and be a part of the people, And so I find that if you fail to understand the local context and really immerse yourself in, you will lose out on many opportunities.
Africa also has many tech hubs, right? So like Lagos, Nairobi. What role do these tech hubs play in the future development of the continent?
That's a brilliant question. I think that Africa must collaborate to compete. And for us to collaborate to compete, we must converge, we must connect, and we must create. And so these major hubs around the continent are places where people come to converge, to share ideas, to build dreams, to find collaborators and partners. So you converge and you connect. When you connect, you collaborate. When you collaborate, you create. And when you create, you can compete globally. And so these hubs are pivotal. These hubs are places where people from around the country, in these different countries, leave their, rural areas and come to these urban centers to, first of all, be in the place where it's at. Because there is something about being in the place where it's at. It's a mind shift. It's a brain explosion. It's a scales remover where you can suddenly see beyond what you ever imagined. Because you see, you're limited oftentimes by your environment if your mind's eye is also soaked in that environment. Until you take your mind's eye either into books, documentaries, films, things that take you into something bigger than you are. If all you consume is in your vicinity, then you will lowball your life because your goals and visions will be at the barest minimum. And so these centers and these hubs are important for people to be able to move, first of all, change their location to change their mindset. And then you go in there and you find people who can inspire you. I started something with my partners many years ago called the Future Awards. And the Future Awards was about finding young people who we believe are the future of Africa. And so what we do is to find these young people, find these stories, and use them as strong, positive images to inspire other young people to be like those people. The superpower for us at the time was to curate a critical mass of young, strong, positive images so that together they can create the future. They can create the kind of world that they want to see owing to their exposure, their expertise, their experience, their capacity, their talent, their competence. And so these hubs are important because that's where you curate the brightest and the best. And the people come and join them and they are fired up because iron must sharpen iron. And so when you come into this community, that's why networking is important. And that's why you must leave your home to go and find your kindred spirit, to go and find the kinds of people you want to be like. And so those hubs become that ground where you come as a seed and then you sow yourself in new soil and then you sprout and finally, become a tree, bringing out the fruits of your purpose in life.
Wonderfully put. I think, like Silicon Valley has shown everybody around the world the importance of these hubs and, pull effect that these create for global talent, really. And I think you nicely put this also for Africa. So when you look at Africa in the past, one thing that many people admire about the continent is that it has leapfrog technology, such as, mobile banking, mobile infrastructure. Do you think that similar things can also happen in AI, biotech, or manufacturing?
Absolutely. We have the numbers. I think that's the biggest thing we need to realize. Of the 550 million people connected to the internet in Africa, for example, Nigeria has 150 million. So I think that Nigeria will play a pivotal role in helping to leapfrog, Africa and the new world of AI and so on and so forth. We have the numbers. We have a human capital that you cannot find anywhere else in the world. And we have a population that has access to these tools and can change, anything using those tools. At the moment, I did mention to you that Nigeria is running a 3 MTT program under the Minister for Digital Economy and Technology and Communication, Dr. Bosun Tijani, MTT program. He's recently launched the National AI Intelligence Strategy for Nigeria, the National Artificial Intelligence Strategy for Nigeria. And part of their plan is to train 1 million young people in AI. But what's important to note is that they are also not just training young people in AI, but they're training them in local languages. Because identity is important, and understanding progress and evolution through your context and your identity is important so that you can solve for your people, solve for your continent, and be able to then make your continent of reckon around the world. And so in Nigeria, for example, we're training 1 million young people in AI and in Nigerian languages as well. And these languages are also spoken in quite a number of countries around Africa. It's also time to begin to use AI to see our cultures and unite our continent much more. Because if I said to you earlier that Africa must collaborate to compete, and for us to collaborate, you must speak the same language and not the foreigner's language anymore. We must be able to use AI to help one another understand quickly our own unique languages on the continent, and also lean more towards the languages that are popular across the countries on the continent, and begin to unite ourselves in our own identity. The West has managed to unite itself in its own identity. So when you think development, when you think innovation, because you think in the Western language, Western culture, Western clothing, everything in the Western style. So you think about solving problems more for the West, as opposed to solving problems in your continent, in your countries, that can then help you leapfrog to be a superpower, to compete with the world. So AI is actually proven to be pivotal for Africa, our own leapfrogging as a continent, and they're using our numbers to also help the world leapfrog. I believe that Africans are the most intelligent people, and I do believe that civilization began from the continent, and we couldn't have just been the ones that God gave this amount of resources and opportunities. But again, in my place, there's a proverb that says, "Ento lori onifila, ento nifila lori." He that has a head doesn't have a cap. He that has the cap doesn't have the head. What does that mean? It means that we must then collaborate. So rather than, people seeing Africa as a place, or countries in Africa as a place to come and, pillage and take away and flee, it's to collaborate and say, we have this, you have this. Let us work together to make the entire world a better place.
You talked about Africa being very diverse as well. So when you look at all the different markets that exist, which one do you think show the most promise right now?
Nigeria is always a leader. The numbers are there. Nigeria is a key driver of the progress on the continent. If we take, for example, the sudden love and attention being paid to the creative economy and African culture, inspired mostly by Nigeria. The Nigerian musicians began to close out major stadiums all around the world, major, event centers, Burna Boy, Whiskey. Many years ago, the band broke into the world with Oliver Twist, and then you're in Selfridges or Champs-Elysees, you're in Times Square, and you're hearing Oliver, Shebele, you're hearing the band. And then today you're going into the Staples Center and the O2s and all the big stadiums in the world, and Burna Boy is selling out, Davido is selling out, and so on and so forth. And you turn on the films on Netflix and Amazon, and Nigerian films are flooding the place, South African films, are all over the place. And so, Nigeria definitely has a key role to play as a big brother of the continent. Nigeria has always sort of carried the continent on its back, either through its military, through its resources, through its finances, and now through its creative economy, because of the numbers. I said to you earlier, 150 million people out of 550 million on the internet are in Nigeria. Kenya, definitely, is one of the markets, the key markets that's going to drive, this near future. Rwanda, absolutely, they position themselves, as a hub. They position themselves as the convergence place where the thinking and the intellectual, exchange and ideas, can come out from. Ghana as well, there's a new generation in Ghana, who's also, say, inspired by Nigeria, catching up with technology, with the creative sector, getting a more resilient population as well, because one of our superpowers on the continent is our resilience, our tenacity. And these markets, definitely be the places to continue to look to. Egypt, South Africa, the markets are there. The opportunities are there. People just need to engage differently. Be more humble, be more fair, And it might sound like, well, who cares about humility in business? Who cares about being mindful in business? But those are values that really keep us in the same world. Those are values that really help us have stability and help us have a meaningful world. If everyone brought out their knives to cut off each other, we'll all be dead. So there must be honor amongst humans, not amongst slaves.
Hi there. Thank you so much for listening. If you're enjoying What's Next and find value in these conversations, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to subscribe or follow the podcast. It's the best way to make sure you never miss an episode, and it helps us bring more incredible insights to you. Your support truly means the world to me. Thank you for being part of this journey. Perfect leeway to my next question. With all the opportunities that you outlined, many investors want to invest in Africa. So what separates successful investors versus those who struggle? Can you share maybe an example of an investor or a business that has really had a success story in Africa?
I mean, those who really thrive are those who try to understand the context, who try to get into the local fabric of the nation. Unilever, for example, they've done quite well. And they've had moments where they were going to leave or close a business, but they found a way. It forced them to understand the countries more, forced them to hire in leadership, Africans, to have their MDs in Nigeria at the moment is Nigeria, to hire people from the countries who understand the local context. You must understand. That's what it is. In going to any market, I can't come to Rome now and not understand Rome. I want to thrive. You must understand the local market if you want to be here for a long time. You can come and raid and quickly milk and go, but if you want to be here, you must be part. Safaricom has shown that in Kenya with M-Pesa. You must be part. I spoke about Bata earlier, and how they became part of the country and the community. So the biggest thing for any investor is to localize, is to realize that beyond business to business, business to customers, there is one cardinal rule: human to human, age to age. And you must humanize your business. You must humanize your investments in a way that truly adds value to the lives of the people. And so that you're not also be seen as a villain. For example, the oil companies who for many years have pillaged oil and destroyed livelihoods of people, but not been able to show enough empathy or been able to localize themselves. So that's why there's constant agitation, So you say, oh, there's kidnapping. But have you seen the lives of the people in that place? Have you seen their water? These guys are fishermen. Their water is black. Their fishes are dead. Their livelihoods are gone. Their children can't go to school because the train that sends them to school is dead. Their houses are blackened. They wake up and they soot all over their homes, all over their body. Black. And you want them not to be angry? You want them not to attack? Those who have attacked their livelihoods and destroyed their lives and made billions of money, most money they ever make in any market, in one market in Nigeria. But they, the most money ever, yet the people languish in poverty, yet they die, yet their children are sick, their nostrils are blackened. Of course you will not have peace of mind. It's time to do business better. It's time for investors to do business better with Africans, because at the end of the day, they have to remember it's human to human.
Yes, what a beautiful way to put it, human to human. I think this is really important beyond Africa in every business conversation, every business encounter we have. So one thing that you also mentioned in the beginning is that Africa is projected to be the biggest workforce by 2050. What skills will define this workforce in the coming decade?
I've always believed that the currency of this generation is talent. I said this when I gave a speech for President Barack Obama in 2017 in Chicago. And 8 years after that, our talent industry on the continent is becoming one of the most formidable resources. And it would still be that way for another 10 to 20 years, especially as long as you have social media. There is a generation that social media is empowering them to convert their talent into economic power. So definitely, we'll still have the talent industry. But I think that technology will continue to rise and young Africans will be adopters. There's deliberate, strategy in place to create generation of, creators in the space. And last year, there was still a gap, even though we have a lot of fears about AI taking jobs. There's still a gap of about 4.5 million jobs, people that were needed to make AI work. So we will take charge of that space, Africa and artificial intelligence. I also think that Africans will come back to the key professions in the world. There seems to be a lot of buzz at the moment around talent in the creative sector, but I think that we will still segue back into the key foundations of the world, which would be education, medicine, engineering, legal, which would be invention, creating stuff that moves the world forward. But what's most important, in the workforce is that Africans are resilient, tenacious, they are innovative, they are agile, they're smart. And I'm not sure if you need much more in the workforce than that. People who would be on the line until the job is done. And people who are agile enough, who are smart, who are quick thinkers on their feet, and who have the capacity to stay good. And so we will always be a diverse continent with diverse skills and capacity. And at every point in time, anywhere you look, you can find us.
Brilliantly put. If we change perspectives a bit, I mean, if you were advising a global CEO or policymaker, what would you say, which 3 industries would you like them to focus on in Africa right now and why?
I would say 1, the creative sector. That space hasn't been harnessed at all. The world is demanding for the creative prowess of Africa. And that space needs massive infrastructure and investments. There is a global value of $3 trillion. And Africa is barely doing, 2 to 3% of this. And that's money on the table. So we need to urgently, invest massively in that sector. And that sector automatically also takes care of young people, reduces migration. So countries that say don't come to our countries, the young people can convert their talent into something on their continent, in their countries. It creates a shift in the economies of those countries and in the lives of those young people, as well as in the pockets of the investors. Technology and renewable energy, definitely. Technology and renewable energy definitely is one of the key sectors, or maybe, is the 2 sectors, So technology and renewable energy. And finally, agriculture. We have so much arable land on the continent. We have so much arable land. We have water for fish, for seafood. Did you know that a major part of the tiger prawns that you see around the world comes from Nigeria? You'll be shocked.
I didn't know that.
And so we have major arable land across the continent, from Ghana, Rwanda, to Kenya, to South Africa. Outside land is always a big deal. So agriculture continues to be a backbone for employment, for food security, and for vast potential for modernization. So those are 4 sectors: technology, renewable energy, and agriculture, that I would say definitely, investors should continue to pay attention to, and you will certainly, make your returns back in leaps and bounds.
Adebola, you're also an author. You wrote the book African Power Girls for your granddaughters initially. Now it has received a much broader audience. What are the key takeaways everybody should take away from this book?
Well, I believe in the power of storytelling. And that's why I wrote that book. I wanted to use stories to inspire my goddaughters, to let them realize that before they were born, there were women like them, in their color, their kind, who've eaten the same fufu like they eat it, who've eaten chakalaka and yamachoma, who've lived in kokrobite and tamale, and who've become great ceiling crashers, mountain movers, boundary breakers. And it's important to tell these stories because I always talk about lowballing. I do not want my young children, young Africans, my godchildren, boy, girl, to lowball themselves in their vision. They must be able to think bigger. They must see beyond where they are right now. And to do that, you must tell them stories of who has become so that they know that they too can become. So the idea of telling those stories, particularly for my goddaughters who were out of Nigeria, is that I wanted them to realize that for every time they went to school or went into a gathering as young Black girls, and anyone ever made them feel less than themselves, they should realize that it's not true because they've come from a place of greatness. They've come from a place where women woke up in the morning with babies behind their backs, and went to farm on hectares, hundreds of thousands of hectares of land, and we're trading cocoa with the West. We're trading gold with the West. and trading arms with the West. They've been at the highest level of banking. They've been at the highest level of innovation and created and invented. They've sent men to NASA. I needed them to know that these women, just by being, are being called great. And so their being should be so big that they are also great in their lives. I never want anyone to make them feel less of who they are. But to do that, they must know where they have come from so that they have clarity on where they can go and how far they can reach.
Brilliant. Many people admire your ability to lead movements and create influence. What's your approach to leadership, and how do you inspire teams and lead communities?
I think empathy. Empathy is important. You must make people see that you see them, that you understand them, that you appreciate them. You must also collaborate. You must collaborate with people. And when you also have a purpose that's bigger than you, and it can bring people on board, when people see that what you're doing is beyond your person, it's about a bigger cause. So for everything you do in life, you must be able to find the bigger cause, the bigger impact that's behind it, and keep people into that. Once you get them behind that, they'll join you on the journey. And then maybe ownership, maybe ownership as well. But I think one of the things is also to remain an inspiring figure, to go into rooms, break boundaries, and do big things. Do big things that inspires your community, that inspires your team members, that inspires your friends, your staff. When people are inspired by you, by your sheer audacity and greatness, people are inspired by just the things that you do on the daily. It keeps the followers committed to your cause. It's also when people get a sense that you want them to thrive, you want them to do well. So even when you are correcting them, when you're scolding, when you're trying to say this is the better way, they know that it's in their best interest. People want to be in a place where they believe you're adding value to their lives. They want to be in a place where they are growing. So they also want you to put them under pressure. They want you to make demands of them. They want you to drive them. So you must drive your team members. You must put them under pressure. You must give them assignments that are beyond them so that they can aspire and stretch themselves to reach, and when they leave, because sometimes while they are with you, they don't even understand it. It's until they leave that they say, oh, now I understand that thing you're trying to teach me. Oh, so now I see the picture. I thank you.
And what advice would you give to young Africans today who want to make a difference in their community and beyond?
That Africa will only grow and do well if Africans pay attention. That all the countries we've all come from in Africa, you cannot grow a country that you curse. We must fall in love with our countries. We must stop talking bad about our countries. We must take big bets on our countries. We must take risks on our countries. We must put our lives on the line for our countries. We must do things that solve problems. Even when we're building businesses, let's build businesses that solve problems for our continent. Let's build prosperity for ourselves, but by solving problems and making people's lives on the continent better. Let's collaborate. Let's find one another. Let's find kindred spirits and collaborate so that we can compete, so that we can enlarge the pie and compete. Let's understand that the citizen is no longer a bystander. So we must hold government accountable. But not just that, but let's also understand that the citizen is no longer a bystander in the narrative that is being shared about their countries. People cannot just sit in LA or in New York or somewhere in Europe and begin to say Africa is this, Africa is that. Now we have the power of social media. Now we have mobile telephony and the internet. We must tell positive stories about our continent, about our countries. We must take seriously the responsibility to change the narratives for our continent. We must build trust with the world so that more people can invest in young Africans, can be comfortable to do business with Africans, and can be comfortable to travel to Africa. We must take charge and tell our own stories. No one is going to tell our stories for us. If the lion doesn't tell his tale, the stories will continue to glorify the hunter. We've been hunted for too long. We are lions. We're strong, we're bold, we're powerful. They can't withstand us. We are formidable. We only need to turn around and roar and everyone else will bow. So you need to step into your power and your identity and your essence. And that is why you must not lose your culture. That is why you must not be carried away by the West. Try to only speak English and speak languages of the West. Try to only want to do things of the West. You must immerse yourself in your identity, in your country, in your culture, in your food. That's why anywhere you find me around the world, I am dressed this way. I say to the people, I carry the blessings and the burden of my people. I say to everyone that cares to listen, I am a moving billboard for my kind, for Africa, for my generation, for Black people. A moving story. I go around the world and immediately you see me, judge me all you care. My job is to leave a positive impact in your heart, in your mind, to change your perception and build trust for Africa. My job is to be part of the data that you collect that helps you change how you see the continent, how you see my people, that builds the trust for you to come and invest and partner and engage Africans not as a savior, but as someone who wants to collaborate. And so young Africans, rise up, know that you have the yam and the knife in today's world, and it's up to you to cut it how you want to cut it, cook it, and serve it as you want. No one is coming to save you. The countries that you're running to, at some point in their own evolution, were just like yours. They're undeveloped, underdeveloped. I remember the first time that Mercedes-Benz's wife rode on the chariot that did not have the horses. They all said, oh, that's witchcraft. The West called it witchcraft. They called innovation witchcraft because they didn't understand it. There's a time when there are no malls in America, where there are no stadiums in Europe. And the beauty is that with technology, we don't have to go through the pains of growth and technology the way many other countries did. There is so much at your fingertips now. You are the generation we've been waiting for. And you can only be that generation if you rise up to the occasion.
Very inspiring. We like to end this show on a positive note, which you've already done, but I will ask you this question anyway, because we ask it to all of our guests. So what makes you optimistic about the future?
Africa. Africa makes me optimistic about the future of the world. Young Africans make me optimistic. Mm-hmm. Africa makes me optimistic about the future of the world. And young Africans, this vibrant, diversified, youthful, innovative, powerful, confident young people on the continent makes me excited and hopeful about Africa itself.
Wonderful. Adebola, thank you so much for being here with us today, for sharing your insights about Africa and your vision for the future. It was really, really inspiring and a remarkable conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Philip.
And to our listeners, stay curious and join us next time for more insights on What's Next.